there's another one for Cardano, but this time it's hosted directly by IOHK, by Charles Hoskinson's company.
So they're directly running their own courses.
Yeah, but it's free and you have to follow it on your own. And they even warned us at the beginning, like, this is an extremely difficult course. And the setup itself, like setting up the tools, is already quite a nightmare. But I mean, that's how it is.
Can I ask you a question? Do you think that that is an indication that it will have a limited audience because their courses are so hard and their code is so hard to run? Not for computers to run, but for like actual programmers to actually grasp and run.
Yeah, absolutely. It already did affect the number of developers who can participate. But of course, there are trade-offs, and so there are pros and cons. The pro or the benefit of doing this is the developers that do want to come in, they are probably the more advanced and they understand these things better compared to more of a junior level, because the barrier to entry is a lot higher.
That was something that I heard Anatoly on some podcast. I think it was a Super Team podcast from a few months ago. He was saying because Rust is not like a popular language and you have to kind of like completely, it might be a more advanced language. I don't know what he was saying specifically, but he indicated that the difficulty of like having a leapfrog, that it's not interchangeable with Ethereum, it actually led its programmer base to be more dedicated, because you were either in or out. You couldn't just like dabble and make like shitty MVP apps or whatever. He's like, you have to actually learn it and then deploy it and then stay in their system, which he thought was because it was like that, it attracted people who are more serious about using their chain. And you think the similar phenomenon is happening with Cardano?
Yep. So, people say that they missed the Bitcoin train and they wish they could have gotten in early. And, getting in early is actually kind of going through hell, actually. And this is sort of what a lot of people in the Cardano community are going through, as in, you have this choice of taking a higher risk, but then if you get in early into Cardano, then you can invest in projects quite early, which is exactly what I've done. But if you want to play it safe, then you would probably want to catch the train that's already left, or like that's quite mature in this case, like Ethereum, Polygon, things like that. But I chose to stay and watch over the projects that's being built on Cardano.
It's interesting that you reference Matic Polygon as mature, because the market cap is only 10 billion, and it's got Solana's speed. Like, I mean, from the end user experience, the speed is as good. So in my mind, I always think about, from a consumer perspective, it's really Ethereum L1 plus Polygon or Matic versus Solana. It's not like, you can't really compare. It's not a fair comparison in my view, because Matic has grown so much. So and you were the first person who brought Matic to my attention, and I had made my initial and only investment in Matic off of your advice, because but why do you view that the Matic train has already left and that Cardano is the one? Because Cardano's market cap is at like 30 billion, even with the correction. And I think Matic's at like 10.
Yeah. So if you look at it from the market cap, then it looks like Cardano it's like the train is already left. But don't forget, there's barely any fully launched project on Cardano. As in, I don't know why the market cap is so big, actually. I'm still confused.
It's way ahead of, it's got all this like success built into the current price.
Right, but it's got pretty much, it's still very empty relative to Solana, Ethereum,
Yeah,
obviously
that's the
Ethereum.
big criticism, is that it has this massive market cap and like very few developers and very few
Right.
like no deployed apps, very few wallets. It's like still, from the metrics that you would measure, it's still like way over, the price is way over what its relative metrics would be.
Right. Right. So for me, the price of ADA doesn't really matter, because what matters is actually, the way I see it is like gasoline, as in it's like petrol, and you can
Mhm.
use it for something. So instead of just parking the money there or parking the ADA there, I'm using it to invest in projects like, for example, there's a new DEX coming up called MinSwap, and then there's another one called Maladex that can offer derivatives,
Okay.
and there's one that's already out called SundaySwap,
Oh,
but
Sunday
I don't
swap.
know. Yeah, I don't know if you've heard what happened to Cardano, but the the blockchain is congested, as
Oh,
in,
it's slow. It's slowed down.
oh yeah, it's so slow that people using SundaySwap are having a hard time to even cancel their transactions.
Oh
Now,
wow. How long does it take?
it could take, I've read on Discord, people could be waiting for 3 days and their transaction is
Oh my God.
still stuck.
That's not a usable chain in terms of
Right.
even
So,
Bitcoin. How long does Bitcoin take? Like 10 minutes or 15 minutes or something?
right. But with Bitcoin, it's just a
Yeah,
transaction.
okay. Bitcoin doesn't
So,
do smart
but yeah,
contracts.
I
So
get
let's
you. I
say.
get your point.
Yeah. You
But
know what's so funny? I want to come back to this, but it just reminded me, I was listening to Vitalik's podcast with the bankless people, and he was actually saying, and I don't know if you were aware of this and how much you still like pay attention to what's going on with Ethereum, but he was saying that even when they upgrade and they can have, I don't know if you saw in my Discord the notes that I took from that, but one thing really popped in my head that he said was, he was like, even after the upgrade, Ethereum, he says transaction speeds can be measured in two ways. One is uh, the broadband, like how much can throughput it there is, and also latency, right? So we all know like speedtest.net or fast.com or
right,
whatever, you can see both. So latency is important, especially for when you're playing video games or whatever, right? But what he said was the speed will actually slow down to, from right now it's 12 seconds. He said it might actually slow down to like 16 seconds. So I was thinking, I was like, wait, the whole point of everybody talking about how Ethereum is so great is that like it's not, it obviously has all these issues, but wait till they finish their Ethereum 2.0 upgrade, and then it's going to get better on all these metrics. But I'm like, it's going to get worse on a very important metric from my perspective. Now, I don't know, is speed, is like, from an end user perspective, that's everything. Like if you can't, like, you know how like if you have a slow iPhone 7 and it's just like struggling to, it just like loads slower than like an iPhone 12 or 13, you, from a consumer perspective, you totally feel that. And from my perspective, like it really shouldn't be slower as you upgrade the chains. Like it should always be getting better on those metrics. So tell me what you think about that and why you think it's happening that way.
so I actually don't know what you mean by, so let's say that the L1 is actually slower. I actually watched that podcast, and if you were to summarize like in one simple sentence, Vitalik actually saying, get off the L1, move to L2.
It's a Matic
Because
Polygon, right?
so Matic is actually a sidechain, but we'll get back to that
I always
later.
get confused between an L2 and a side chain, and I think most people confuse it the way I
Yes. uh I think blockchain itself, there's so many things, so it's
I mean,
hard.
we're coming up with these definitions on the fly. They're like whatever 1-2 year
Right.
old definitions. Okay.
So let me give you an example of an L2. The beacon chain, Arbitrum, Optimism, ZK Sync. Those are layer 2 Ethereum solutions. How do we know it's layer 2? They use ETH as their native currency. So with Matic, it's actually
They have the Matic
Matic.
token.
It's the Matic token, yeah. So you have to use a bridge. So if you want to transfer from, let's say, Optimism, from, sorry, L1 to Optimism, then you need to use a bridge to send it to them. But the transaction speeds are always faster and it's always lower. So don't get these people wrong. They're always trying to make things faster and cheaper.
But if the L1 is getting slower, wouldn't that cascade to the L2 and the sidechain?
No, because the L2s, they work independently of the L1 because all they need to do is just end up batching all these transactions into L1 and that's it.
Okay.
So they don't need to care about the speed of L1 actually.
I feel like it would at some point matter, or I guess it doesn't at some volume, because this doesn't the speed itself affect the transactions per second or whatever, what the throughput is. But I guess if you just keep what would you call it, like I guess if you just keep adding layers, like abstraction layers, like Ethereum, then what was the one you said, Arbitrum
is yeah, another L2.
And then you could have something that like a token sitting on top of Arbitrum.
So I think Arbitrum, I'm not sure if they're going to release their own tokens, but
then it would turn into a sidechain, or that would just be like some sort of governance token for the DAO or whatever.
No, if they did release their own tokens, as long as the transaction fee is still paid using ETH, it's actually not a sidechain. So it's still powered by Ethereum.
Okay. So it burns Ethereum to do the transactions, whereas Matic burns Matic tokens.
Yep.
So wouldn't the value, because it looks like from the metrics that I'm looking at the last few months, especially the last like 6 weeks, it looks like in terms of like volume and the wallet addresses that are actually using it, it appears that Matic is getting a ton of new wallets, and all the new users are going to Polygon, not directly onto Ethereum. And that's the only thing, like if you, and then obviously Solana is like also exploding in avalanches as well. But so like, that was my thinking. I was like, well, Ethereum still has starting from a higher base, and it's keeping pace if you include Matic. But you're saying it's not really an L2, it's a side chain. So does that mean that Matic itself will value will accrue to Matic, not to the underlying Ethereum?
Matic still uses L1 Ethereum to batch their transactions. Mm-hmm. So it works somewhat like Arbitrum or an Optimism. So let's say you have 1,000 transactions, then every now and then they batch it, and then they show the proof or save the proof to L1, and that basically secures the transaction history.
Does it mean that Matic's system burns less Ethereum, whereas the L2 will burn more because the batches will be more frequent, or you're going to need more Ethereum on a L2 versus a sidechain?
So in terms of how much they burn, that actually, I don't know the answer to that. But what I do know is because the L2s actually use ETH to make transactions, then they would probably burn more, assuming that there'll be
the volume of Matic, they would burn way more than, like if Matic is doing 100,000 transactions and it for whatever, like call it 5 minutes, and Arbitrum, I'm mispronouncing it, I'm sure, if they're doing the same volume, maybe the L2 would burn more Ethereum than Matic. So like Matic would be more efficient, assuming that the price of Matic tokens was cheaper.
Right. It's actually a lot more complicated. You can't really estimate, because with Matic, it's up to the type of transaction that you want or a user wants to make that makes them want to interact with layer 1 Ethereum. If it doesn't have to, it just only does it on the Matic blockchain or Polygon blockchain. It doesn't actually touch the layer 1 ETH. So it's like optional. And instead of burning ETH, it's actually burning Matic.
Okay. This is really interesting. So to take it back to Cardano, so are you always comparing what is Cardano doing to what is the option in the Ethereum system? Are you always, like, every time you see something new in Cardano, you're always looking to the Ethereum and seeing what's the difference and how are they approaching it differently?
So with blockchains today, the choices they make is already set in stone. Like with Ethereum, for example, they're switching to ETH2. That if you watch podcasts, Vitalik said that could take up to 6 years. We don't know if that's like optimistic guess or not, but it's for Solana. What they chose to do with what they assume is the definition of decentralized, of what they assume is the definition of distributed, is set in stone. And so what I'm saying is with Cardano, what they're doing and the plans that we consider as something new, they've already written those in the roadmap. So pretty early on, you can already compare all these blockchains and see all the pros and cons. And the reason why I'm sticking to Cardano is because I think the way that they're architected is, or the foundation of how it's built, the blockchain is built, is the one that's most likely going to last for 50, 100 plus years.
Yeah, so that's the big argument. And from what I also understand is Cardano is building a much more robust foundation. But part of the issue is that they're coming off the block. If this is a race, they're like, it's way slower in all the metrics, but they're building this like iron palace, whereas everybody else is just like building and then tearing down and building again. And then and that seems to be the big criticism that the Solana founders have with Ethereum, which is like, yes, Ethereum, he had an analogy saying, like, if you're trying to push a volume of water through a pipe, Ethereum just keeps adding more tiny pipes, whereas Solana has the volume of, like, he would say if Ethereum has 50 tiny pipes equals one giant Solana pipe. And so their argument is first fill up a massive volume and then shard after that, and like go to the maximum amount that the hardware can go before you start doing rollups and shards and things. And so what would be the difference with Cardano? Like, does it have more volume or more speed? And you definitely mentioned last time we talked, it has a much better security.
So what Solana is doing is, again, people are making different choices with different trade-offs. So Solana is relying on hardware acceleration. So that's why I saw on Twitter, Anatoly talked about the M1 Mac Mini, for example, or the MacBook. And I saw that and I was like, okay, so that kind of shows that the blockchain requires a certain set of hardware. Now, with Cardano, they actually have a very, very low standard when it comes to hardware. And I have a tweet somewhere trying to compare like what it takes to run a validator, from how much it costs to the storage requirements and the RAM requirements, stuff like that. And Cardano has one of the lowest, but
lighter than even Ethereum.
Yes, because Ethereum is about 300 gigabytes in size, is in the size of the blockchain right now.
Okay.
So because obviously they had a earlier head start, but my point is, this requirement is actually somewhat of a constraint, as in the blockchain itself doesn't run as fast because of this low requirement. But what Ethereum and Cardano both are doing is they're playing a lot with, instead of hardware acceleration, it's cryptographically accelerated. So that's what sharding is about. That's what zero knowledge proof is all about. It's about cryptographically accelerating the blockchain. So it's it kind of, in the end, the goal is to make it more decentralized. So you can have lower hardware requirements and therefore more people can run the nodes.
So the way Cardano is set up now, even though it is not more decentralized than Ethereum right now, right? We can see on the maps that I think Bitcoin has whatever 10,000 nodes or validators, and Ethereum has 3,000. And do you know the latest numbers? I haven't looked at it. Cardano is not super decentralized, but everything when it's starting new is going to be smaller than the things that it's competing against. But you're saying because it needs such a small footprint in terms of processing power and then storage, it obviously, if it's a much lighter system, it could be running on any random, there's always going to be a little bit. You could put some small little old device running Cardano in some corner of the world, and so that chain will never die.
Right.
So to speak. And you and I had a discussion at the offices, whatever, 6 weeks ago or maybe 2 months ago, and we had a discussion about Solana has the highest performance requirements of most of these chains, where they have like very high speed requirements, and they're running at the maximum capacity of chips, which allows them to run so fast. But over time, the storage requirements just keep growing. And then my counter argument to that is, well, storage cost keeps going down, so it doesn't matter. So that'll balance it out. And that's just like, we're just positing this today in 2022, but we won't know, will the storage requirements outpace the declining cost of storage costs itself? So right. If it ends up being that like, you need a massive cluster of computers just to keep the chain alive, you're necessarily going to have a much smaller pool of people to keep it distributed. And I think I would say, first off, I think there's going to be multiple chains doing multiple things. So I don't think that, I think there's very realistic that Cardano, Ethereum, and Solana, and Avalanche, and definitely Bitcoin, these are all going to persist. And they may all just find homes doing different things. But that seems to be the big trade-off. So what are the major advantages? Okay, so the first one is, you're saying, okay, Cardano definitely is, in terms of distribution, let's say Bitcoin is its own thing and it's not part of this world because it doesn't do smart contracts, let's say for now. Cardano, you think, has much better legs for being the most distributed.
Yeah, and obviously, what we say today might not be the case for every other blockchain. So, for example, Solana might suddenly, again, they're betting on the hardware costs, and if the price does go down significantly, then, like for example, the M1, if that inspires companies like Intel to catch up, and then suddenly now the M1 or the ARM architecture is suddenly more common around the world, then you can see that there'll be like a significant bump in CPU performance worldwide. And then maybe you can run the nodes better because of that. So they're betting on things that we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but we can see Solana is betting on hardware requirements. Cardano is playing it safe, but they're betting on cryptographic acceleration, and then some other blockchains do differently.
Can you go back to cryptographic acceleration, and what is the different thing that Cardano is doing versus Ethereum and Solana? What are they doing so I still don't understand, what is cryptographic acceleration? I think it must have misunderstood.
So cryptographic acceleration in this case is, let's say that so let me talk about how a validator or a node works.
Okay.
So a node does two things. It's different per blockchain, but let's use Ethereum as an example. A node in a proof of stake network, okay, let's be more specific, can produce a block. And when it produces a block, it posts it on the blockchain, and then what happens to other nodes is they validate if this block is actually valid.
Okay.
So they're actually very busy, because every time a block is posted, they need to rerun the transactions, blah, 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 sorry, can't talk, transactions in the block. And then if any of those happen to be invalid, then the majority of these nodes would have to say that this is invalid. So the thing is, the biggest or the slowest process is when you have to rerun these transactions, sorry, it's a very slow process. Now, what if instead of rerunning the entire set of transactions in the block, you have like a proof, a cryptographic proof that says, hey, these things are valid. And all you need to do is just check if this proof is correct or not. So that way, instead of rerunning the entire set of transactions in the block, you just have to check one thing now. So
you just check the change, the change. You don't have to check the full thing.
Right. So that way you save so many steps. So something like that.
So Cardano is designed in that way, whereas Solana is designed they have this thing called proof of history. Are you familiar with how that works?
Not so much, but proof of history essentially makes proof of stake faster.
Yeah, it like resyncs, it like makes sure it doesn't matter if things are slightly out of sync. As things, move around the world, it'll sync it up properly, apparently, if I'm understanding it correctly.
Yeah, I need to read more on that. But the biggest benefit of Solana is something called time to finality. So when you make a transaction, even if it's successful, other blocks need to actually store that information. It doesn't matter if you've made a successful transaction, but only one node, sorry, not other blocks, but other nodes would have to store that information. But if only one node stores it, then it's actually not a completed transaction, actually. So time to finality
to agree.
Right. So time to finality is when like a certain percentage of those nodes agree. So that's what it means, because by then you cannot revert that transaction, because there'll be too many nodes that already hold the true information.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So okay, so we know with Cardano they're using cryptographic acceleration. We know with Solana it's using this proof of history, and it's very taxing on the processor and the speed. Like you need to have fast, a lot of storage, very fast speeds, and a lot of processing power. So those put them in a little bit of opposite ends of how easy it is to decentralize. What are the other like major advantages for Cardano in terms of like having it being like a more long-term sustainable chain? You had mentioned last time it has better security. What are the other factors that you think would make Cardano like a good long-term chain? Because I always thought, I remember seeing a video with Hodgkinson. He goes all over the world, and of all the people that he's cultivated like governments the most, I think. Like he's focused a ton on like cultivating governments, whereas the other chain founders or whatever, they're focused more on cultivating, I'm sure Hodgkinson also cultivates programmers, but like the other guys are like basically for the most part ignoring governments. And he's going out of his way to try and get them to adopt his chain. So what are the other like major advantages you think that will give it like long-term legs?
So I think this is one that I haven't really mentioned, and that is Cardano is designed with both L1s and L2s together. As in, sorry, let me rephrase that. They designed L1s and L2s sort of at the same time so that it's tailor-made for each other. Whereas if you look at Ethereum, L1 was built and then suddenly they hit a wall, and then therefore L2 is built. And so the biggest advantage of having an L1 that's built alongside an L2 is you have a very, very, you can say elegant I don't know what other better.
They pre-built designed. That's why he calls his version a Gen 3 blockchain. Is they pre-built knowing, because they're watching what was happening with Ethereum, and they said, okay, well, we'll remake a new chain knowing that an L2 is going to come at some point.
Yes, but the difference between an L2 in Ethereum and an L2 in Cardano is the user experience. This is why I think Cardano is doing something quite smart, because we talked about L2s in Ethereum, right? And it drove you crazy, because if you have a smart contract on L1, you need to redeploy it on L2 in Ethereum. And if someone just launched an L2 on Ethereum, there's pretty much nothing, because it's pretty much a new blockchain. So you need to bridge, you need to port the money away to the L2, and then that takes a lot of effort. And then the average person would understand it, because there's Ethereum, suddenly there's L2s, and then there's side chains. What the heck?
Mm-hmm.
It's too complicated. But with Cardano, the smart contract just needs to be on L1, and the L2 is like a highway on top of L1 that just speeds up the transaction. So you just need to port the transaction to the L2, and because Cardano uses a similar accounting model to Bitcoin called extended UTXO, it naturally allows that to happen, because extended UTXO is, I don't want to get into the details too much, but the point is, because it's actually, every time you make a transaction, it produces something called an output. And these outputs, they can be locked on layer 1, and then its existence can be duplicated on layer 2. And then when you're done with the transaction, then all you need to do is just to commit the final state to layer 1. So I don't know if that's you.
No, that makes sense. So like, it doesn't have to change the state on L1 until something has happened on L2. So it moves very fast at an L2 speed. And then just, I mean, that's the way L2s work, right? They do all this work on another layer, and then just like you record it onto the L1 after.
Right. But with L2s on Ethereum, it's more like you might as well abandon L1 and then just move to L2. As in, from a user standpoint, you're still, you have to be either on L1 or L2. Whereas on Cardano, you're always on L1.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a really interesting thing. And with Solana, it's all one L1 for now.
Yes.
Until they run out of, until it start. I mean, they recently choked, had another kind of like slowdown. It sounded like it was their system got overwhelmed with bot requests and duplicate, and so like, you know, it like filled up their capacity, and the whole chain slowed down. That's why I guess they're still in beta mode. But theoretically, it's going to be a while before Solana, because Solana keeps speeding up. As it just like, I think they have this motto that says, I think something like the software, or I can't remember if they say the software or the chain, but they basically say the software should run at the speed of the hardware, meaning as hardware keeps speeding up, the chain should just naturally speed up, and have more volume and stuff. So because I remember hearing them, they were saying that transactions per second should increase, you know, as chips go from 5 nanometer to 4 to 3, it'll go from like 40,000 per second to 80 to, you know, 120 or something like that, or some much faster speed. There's one quick nugget that I think is interesting, which is, I don't know if you've been following Helium Network. Do you know what that is?
I believe it's a 5G network, right?
Yeah, so it's like, and I don't really know that much about it. I'm still like, it's been, I followed a bunch of Helium people on Twitter, and then Twitter is like showing me random Helium things. But it's basically like, so like 5G has a very because of the wavelength, it only travels whatever, like 150 meters or something, whereas 4G can go like 1 kilometer plus. So it's like a 90% reduction in terms of like how far the signal travels. And
Yeah.
so you necessarily would need like 10 more towers per given space. And so Helium is basically like, one of the great things about blockchains is it allows you to like allocate, you can like, even at like a very microscopic amount, like at a bit level, you can allocate monetary value for each bit that's traveling. And so as your phone randomly hits all these random towers, you could theoretically you pay, or you can monitor the transactions. And so you basically pay per data usage, right? And so you don't necessarily need telecom cell. In each country, there's usually, it ends up being like these oligopolies of 3 or 4 big telecom companies. And maybe of those 3 or 4, there's like 2 usually that have like really good spectrum, and then the like 2 crappy ones that don't work well. And then you have the broadband system and Wi-Fi, right? And so the reason why the reason why there's actually Wi-Fi everywhere, blanketing us constantly, we're most of the time actually completely surrounded by Wi-Fi, right? But we're never able to use it because nobody wants to give you their Wi-Fi for free. And so there's this whole like, that's why nobody has like your phone isn't constantly connected to the internet. But with Helium, right now they're focusing on Internet of Things. So like they'll like have these Helium, basically call it like a Helium Wi-Fi router, right? And your Internet of Things thing will like connect to it and get paid. But like theoretically, your iPhone can then just pay the Helium network. You just buy like 3 gigs, and if everybody eventually can then start making money off of their Wi-Fi signals, you could be in Jakarta and be constantly, you just pay the Helium network and it'll automatically divvy up to 1,000 different customers a day the amount of data you need. So you can, and obviously with 5G, you can do that as well. And so like, you could see a future where like, oh, well, you don't necessarily need to have one single provider. You don't necessarily only need to pay Telkomsel for data. Telkomsel could be one of the many data providers that I provide. And what that does is it like reroutes a lot of like packets away from like small bandwidth single 5G towers into like much bigger, you can more efficiently route the packets. So what was the point of this whole story? there was a point to it. Anyways, so I've been following the Helium network, and at some point I because these are the first real working applications. They went from 2,000 broadcasters, I think like a year ago, to they have 500,000 now. They're growing at like, bananas. When I first started like following them like 6-8 weeks ago, it was like 400,000. They added another 100,000, and I'm like, oh my God, this is like nuts. So, a lot of these chains are being deployed in the real world and like working. And so that's something really interesting. What else have you been working on in Cardano?
Well, pretty much, I'm going to write my first, I've actually written my first smart contract, but it's still very basic, and learning Haskell. So we have assessments coming up, stuff like that, and we have homework, taking lessons on like every Monday and Wednesday night. And I can tell you that even, let's say we have 20 programmers, so there are 20 people in my class. Not all of them are programmers, but with those 20 people, I think some of them might not pass, because again, this is one of those things where the Cardano team made a very difficult decision of should we lower the barrier to entry, but then the people who build smart contracts on the blockchain might end up causing DeFi exploits.
Oh, okay.
So they want, so Haskell is actually a very safe programming language, because it's called a functional programming language. So the way you write this or the way that you write the code is very, it's close to math, essentially. So
Okay.
you can't say one thing and then something else happens. You can't do that.
Has to work.
Yeah, it has to work exactly like what you imagine. Of course, bugs can still happen, but it just reduces the probability of those happening.
Mhm.
And uh, this is why I chose to study Haskell, because it's hard, but the point of using a certain tool is not because of how easy or how hard it is. It's about what it's for. So that's why I think for engineers and for developers, really it's about what they're going to use it for instead of
Yeah, I would
pleasure.
think that I do think that there's a path. Like I don't I on my Discord I've been using that analogy that like I feel like the major chains, because of the limited amount, like the choke point is not actually chips and how many validators you can have in the world. Like there is that concept of like there is a limited amount of block space. Do you know that concept? The
Yeah,
block space concept. So it's like there's a limited amount of like chips and bandwidth in the world, and so it's like market share of how many. If you were gonna run if you're gonna make blocks, you have to choose. You can't have the same. So you could do Bitcoin or Ethereum, whatever, right? So I do think, but I don't really think that like in the medium and long term, that's any kind of limitation, since you can always just build more. If there's demand for it, there'll be more chip fabs. Like there's a ton of fabs being built right now that'll be producing, 10 times, I would be surprised if there's not 10 times as many chips in the world 10 years from now as there is today, just because of all the demand from like crypto and AI and XYZ companies. But so that's not really the limiting factor. The limiting factor is how many engineers are in the world and how many languages can each engineer support. And so, like I think with Facebook, they built React Native. Is that correct?
yeah,
And so like that's a way for them to like have one program that kind of works on both, and then you have to do some customization on both iOS and Android, but they can for the most part write the program in React. And then
yeah,
okay, so like maybe something like that will come where you can have like some consolidated program that will allow you to support multiple chains with the same team. But at least for now, to my mind, the limiting factor uh, is how many languages, how many chains can a given company support. And so Uniswap, they just added Matic, right? So like Uniswap runs on Ethereum, and now it also runs on Matic after that tweet. Like I don't know if you saw it like 6 weeks ago, the CEO of Matic, he's like tweeted out like pleading for Uniswap, please run on our chain. And then they like just did it based on like all the, it was one of the, like Twitter is powerful, man, like especially in this field, like
yeah, yeah,
so, but the limiting factor is like Uniswap doesn't have an unlimited amount of engineers to throw at every random chain, so they have to like be um, careful with their engineering resources. So, however, on the other hand, are you familiar with how like banking software works? Because you work in a fintech company. Do you ever like interact with like Cobalt and some of these ancient programs?
no, but I've seen uh some very ancient programming languages being used. So something called Delphi, I think it's
Uh-huh.
one of those old ones, but I get your point, because in my company, for example, we're actually having a hard time because these ancient programming languages, you can't find talent to work on them.
Yeah,
So
and that's the big issue. So, however, so there's more. How many programming languages, like real, like living programming languages, are there right now today? There might be 100, right? Because there's all these like niche programming languages that we don't really hear about because they're not part of the consumer companies.
yeah,
Like Cobalt is one of them, where I remember I was like, what is this, like some programming language that like banks love because it runs on like old IBM machines. And like there's still companies that like buy mainframes
mm,
because they're like it's all how would you call it, like path dependent programming. They didn't just like start clean sheet. They just like, we can't throw all this old stuff out. So like they just have to keep supporting this like ancient architecture from the 60s or 80s or whenever it was.
Yeah.
Um, so there are going to be, I think there's got to be a ton of chains. So like I think there's going to be a significant number of chains, maybe only a few major chains. Like I think the analogies of currencies is actually the wrong analogy. Like, so everybody's like, well, if you look at like compare Solana to the US dollar or compare like Bitcoin to gold or whatever, I was like, yes, that's all fine and good in one dimension of like putting a lens on these chains. But another dimension is you don't really need, these things live or die based on the people that are alive keeping it running and living. Whereas the dollar doesn't really need like, you know, a ton of like engineering talent to keep it alive. Right. So that's kind of my thing is like, I think there's probably going to be several chains and then like a bunch of tokens sitting on top. Like, have you ever used USDC before?
Yeah.
And it's like awesome. And they have that same like USDC sits on Ethereum, Solana, and I think Avalanche.
Yeah. They do support multiple chains. Yeah.
And it's literally like they're just like, yeah, okay, fine. We'll just take a, you know, here's what issue $1 billion of tokens, and then we'll take that $1 billion, put it in an FDIC insured bank account, and then put a token on the thing, and this token represents that dollar, and you'll never see it, and nobody cares either. Like as long as it's audited and actually there, everybody's fine using it. So, by the way, let's segue for a moment. Have you done any research on Avalanche?
So apart from the video that I show you, actually no, but I'm Avalanche, Cosmos, they're all trying to be something called layer zero blockchain, where they can be like the go-to blockchain or the Amazon of the blockchain, because all the other chains can just hook up to them and then other people can build chains off of them, something like that.
Yeah,
But
can
when
you
I look at
explain what does that mean? Like, can you in detail, how can you become a layer zero? Do you understand technically what they're trying to do? How are they able to
so
do?
so layer zero is like if this is a solar system, it's actually sort of like the sun in the sense that actually that's not a really good analogy because the sun's not connected to anything. But
How can they
yeah,
be
imagine
below Solana, Ethereum, Cardano? How can they be under it?
so blockchains, they all have a common pattern, and this works similar to a bridge.
Okay.
So how bridges actually work is I don't know if this is the implementation used by Avalanche or not, but one thing you could do is if you have one blockchain and you want to send money to the other blockchain, you could burn the tokens on one blockchain, use that proof of burn to mint other tokens on the other blockchain. And
Ah, that's
then,
really clever.
and then yeah, you have
Then
basically transferred it.
you transferred the value from one to the other.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, I don't know exactly if that's the same way they're doing it, but
Okay.
if you have all these chains connected, then the biggest advantage that you have is you're you're like a pickaxe in a gold mine because everyone's using it. So the
That's
thing
interesting.
is, I just don't know who's gonna do it, and I just don't know
Actually works.
if there's like a. I think to me, this is just my opinion. It's
Mhm.
like a geeky project. It's not.
Avalanche.
Yeah, it's like a nerd's project. Okay, why? Because if you ask me, like, what problem are you trying to solve? If they say, oh, we want to solve interoperability between blockchains, do we have the problem right now? Like, uh, maybe if you're talking about you want to build a DEX that can work with Bitcoin, Solana, uh, Cardano, Matic, stuff like that. Uh, if you do get to build that, in terms of security, you'd have a very difficult time because I think I don't know if you've read this tweet by Vitalik, but he's actually not a fan of cross-chain bridges
Yes, I
because
saw a tweet that he said he believes the future is multi-chain but not cross-chain. And I only have a mild understanding of what he's saying. I have a very like limited understanding. So what do you think he means by that, and what do you think about it?
Yeah, so multi-chain is like Ethereum. So there's Arbitrum, Optimism, ZK as L2, and then
L1, L2. Okay, so
right,
multi-chain, even though they're
that's
in the
it.
same ERC20
Yeah,
world
yeah,
ecosystem. Okay.
that's
And,
multi-chain.
and wait, the other thing that's important, I think, then you tell me if I'm wrong. If you're building an L2 on an L1, you're using the same programming languages, right?
Yeah,
And so you're already, even though it's two chains, the whole choke point, in my view, it is not of like programmers not being able to support multi things, is like you're in the same language family. So that's not an issue.
it depends. For example, on Cardano, you could actually, there'll be a project launching called Milkomeda. You could use Solidity to write smart contracts on Cardano, but as a sidechain.
You would
So
make a side chain that on Cardano. Okay.
yeah,
So Matic could do Matic Cardano
uh,
as
no,
a,
no,
there's
as in
sidechain on Ethereum.
you could launch a smart contract using Solidity. That's it, but it's not cross-chain yet.
Okay. So what was Vitalik saying when he said the future is multi-chain, not cross-chain?
I don't know if I don't think we know what's going to happen, but what he's actually saying is he's not a fan of cross-chain because it's not secure, and I don't know exactly why it's not secure. I don't think he specified it. I'm not too sure if he did, but
Okay. So I can understand how, yeah, that's the thing that I'm still trying to wrap my head around is like we know I'm on a Mac, right? But I can I can have a video call with someone on a Android phone, or XYZ different devices. We've got 1,000 different devices that can all talk to. It doesn't matter. Like and so what exists on, because we're like an abstracted layer above our operating systems, and I don't actually understand the technical way. I guess Zoom, like you and I are doing a Zoom call, and let's say you were on a Android phone, theoretically, right? Like, I guess Zoom figures it out, right? And because they're a centralized computer, they are the ones who are coordinating the different languages. And there's really not that many languages that like consumer products are running on anyways. You might have like a Microsoft and a Android and like a Mac and a Swift. You might have like five or six different languages. So that the thing is like, that's what I'm thinking. I'm like thinking, well, from a consumer perspective, like, can I get an NFT on Solana and then use it in, let's say I want to go into the metaverse on like Oculus's metaverse, and I want to interact with, let's say I want to play in your game. What was the name of the game that you have on Cardano?
Pavia.
Oh, what's it called? Pavia. That's right. So we still don't understand whether or not I can wear my skin that I bought in, like right now, Pavia is in that 2D world, but let's say we can go and play around it in a 3-dimensional way in a few years with like VR. If I'm wearing a skin from Solana, I don't know, will it work in Pavia or not? That's a real question in my view.
Yeah, NFTs is a bit tricky because what does it mean to have an NFT or transfer an NFT from one chain to another? Could this mean that you can mint
like the way you're
of an
talking
NFT,
about?
and
Yeah,
then
like you were saying, you burn one and you mint there. So would that be the way to transfer it? You would burn an NFT here and mint it there?
yeah, so I don't know if that's a valid thing to do because it kind of means that you could actually produce a duplicate. Let's say there's something wrong, okay, and then it didn't get burned. then you have two NFTs in two blockchains.
And one's
So
not, and yeah, okay, then you just got Cardano NFT, and like let's say the degen apes on Solana. I try to burn it here, it mints on Cardano, but then it never actually burns. So now it exists in both simultaneously,
yeah,
even though they have the minting time is different. So you now just have two different NFT. That's interesting. But what about wrapping? Like that's something you and I were talking about before. Like we have wrapped Bitcoin
yep.
you can buy wrapped Bitcoin on Ethereum or whatever, and like there's Wormhole, which is like Solana's like bridge system. Like I still don't understand how those work. We should do like an episode just like talking about how to get from one world to the other.
Yeah, again, it's a very complex world, and I think it's still very, very, very new. And I think Solana is, or someone's building a bridge between Solana and Ethereum, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, we have to see how it goes and if people actually use it. So Cardano is having something similar with something called Singularity Net. So it's an
Okay.
ERC20 converter. And so you can transfer ETH tokens to Cardano, but then you get blasted by the gas fees. So
Ethereum gas fees, right?
yeah,
Yeah,
and
Ethereum to me is, from a consumer perspective, is unusable. So like
yes,
it adds a ton of complexity to Ethereum in my view, because this is the biggest issue. Like, yeah, it's fine when you're like some celebrity or you've already made a ton of Ethereum. Like if you got into Ethereum early, like spending $50, $100 of Ethereum to get your tokens and stuff doesn't, or get your NFTs doesn't matter. Like NFTs right now are the first consumer product, because DeFi, even though DeFi summer happened in 2020, that's not consumer products. That's like financial trading, right? DeFi is like distributed finance. NFTs are clearly, they're going to be way more than consumer products. That part is obvious. Like they're turning into like all, it's like a universal concept that it's like paper. Like you can have the Bible, and you can also have your receipt from the local store printed on the concept of NFTs. But the consumer, like the from a consumer perspective, like I can get a Phantom wallet, I can go to any website, and I can and like the speed and the cost is zero, right, to the end user. If it's but with Ethereum, let's say you're starting today in January 2020, and you're like, oh, I want to get like you go to OpenSea, which is like a centralized company basically on Ethereum, and you can pay $50 for a $3 NFT, right? Or so that doesn't make any sense. And so what would you do? You would go, OpenSea supports would have to go onto Matic. Then like you're a consumer, you've heard about Matic, you don't know, you don't even, half the time you don't even know that it's part of Ethereum.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
just like a different brand.
yeah. And the user experience actually, it still sucks. As in, it's got to be as simple as just topping up and then buying it. It's got to be something like that. Like they don't even need to know that it's running on what kind of blockchain or which blockchain. That's the end goal. But right now, it just feels like you have to be sort of a geek to, if you have your Solana address, right? But then originally these wallet addresses are like freaking long.
Yeah.
And let me give you an example of how bad blockchain is right now. So I just saw my dad 2 weeks ago. He was playing around with MetaMask,
Okay.
and I couldn't. I've never seen someone been so angry because he's using a blockchain.
Yeah.
Because he was really upset with Ethereum, and he
Why?
just,
Because the fees were high and his things may not go through in the
so
time.
fees quite high, and then because it's such a mess. So because Ethereum is when things get concurrent or asynchronous, it gets really messed up. So he's using 1 inch, and then he made a transaction, and then he accidentally bought the wrong token because the swaps is just a matter of pressing a few buttons, and then that's the gas fee. What, $300 gone, and
Oh,
then he had to
snap,
redo that, and then
$300.
another $300 gone, and
He
then
burned $600 right off
yeah, the
and
gas fee
there's no
is like
reversing it.
there's no reversing it. Yeah,
Oh
so
my
something like
God,
that, and
that's so
then
much
he
money.
had to. So he, I think, so there's something called. It's a bit hard to explain, but it's actually it's it's like a synthetic stock, but I'm not sure what's in it actually. I'm not really sure,
Oh, okay, okay, like
but
wrapped,
yeah, it's a
like
wrap
wrapped
token,
Tesla
stuff like that.
stock or
And
whatever.
then this I don't know, this Dex or whatever delisted that. He
And then what
couldn't.
happened to his wrapped thing?
He still has it on his wallet, but he needs to use an L2 to sell it because they removed it from an L1 because the gas fees are so high. So,
So he has to then spend gas fee to move it up to an L2 and then
yep,
trade it on a DEX to just get some money out.
yep, and then move it down to L1 and then burn
This is
gas.
the kind of shit I'm talking about. This is just DeFi user experience, and people who do DeFi, first of all, have capital for the most part. They have money to spend, and they're assuming cost of doing business and is driving them crazy. Okay. That's a much higher threshold for annoyance. Like if you waste my $1 and I'm doing a DeFi transaction, I will be a little bit annoyed, but not that much. Let's say you're going to Starbucks and you're buying a coffee for $4 and they just like waste $1 of you're like, that drives you nuts.
Yeah,
And so like and that's why I long term think, at least from a consumer perspective, and uh, uh, you know, that's why from a consumer perspective, I feel like Solana has much broader consumer end user adoption potential because it like works at the speed and the cost of what like um, it just like works the way and then when I sent, so like I have a like different Solana addresses, right? And like but NFT addresses, so like my name dot soul, right? And I could send USDC. First you do a test for like 1 penny or whatever, but then you just send it to the name, right? So I bought my brother-in-law's dad's name. He asked me because for some reason they weren't allowed to get what was it? They weren't allowed to get like something. Oh, they couldn't get FIDA tokens for some reason. Like Bonfida had to like ban Americans because of
hmm,
this, because of like all the stupid regulatory stuff. And they asked me, can you please buy the name for him? And so, but then like I sent him some test money and stuff, and it, arrived instantly. It worked. And you're just like, I could test a penny and it cost me, 1/1000th of a penny to send him a penny. And
yeah,
um and that's the way, and I know that'll go up over time probably, but like the cost of things, but like that's the way things are. That's the way you imagine, we're spending whatever $1,500 on iPhones, and like you're half of the reason you're spending all that money is just to get the latest chip in there, because you don't want, like, you're so annoyed when things like are slow and janky. And so um I think probably like it's going to skew to people, to like services that want the speed and stuff. And then I think like Cardano, if it actually works out, it sounds to me like all the like the things that speed is not the main factor. uh I think like the things that might skew much more to security, like because he was talking, I remember seeing a video of Hutchinson talking a lot about like blockchain voting, and he was thinking that like Cardano is probably the best served in that space for like actually like running elections and things.
yeah. The thing with Cardano and the thing with cryptographic acceleration is it's not limited to Cardano, but I think Solana might be able to do this as well in the future and boost their TPS. But Cardano plus L2 and a bit of linear scaling, it's the theory is that it could go up to 1 million transactions per second,
That's
and
a lot.
even higher. So I completely agree with you that it's all about usability, because especially for Cardano, it's targeting governments and it's targeting the everyday people. It's not they're not trying to brand themselves as the blockchain for DeFi geeks or DeFi nerds. It's supposed to be something that the average person can use. But right now, from a technical standpoint, it's not in its final form yet. And I'm really interested to see its final form and the other blockchain's final form. Like ETH is going to have so L1 ETH is going to be merged to the beacon chain, and
Mhm.
so ETH2 essentially supposed to launch this year. Uh, Hopefully, don't know, but yeah, it's really interesting to see all these blockchains try to morph into their best state. So we're gonna have to see which one stays alive.
Yeah, I would what's interesting is I look at these top 200 it's not an accurate because it's like you're comparing apples and oranges sometimes on these websites where it's like what site was it, like Coin Market Cap, and it's got like 200 whatever or 500 chains that are going.
Mm.
And so it'll like have near the top like Tether and like USDC. I'm like, that's not, I don't give it, like it's always gonna be $1. Like it doesn't, why are you even putting that in the thing? Like that's not a chain. Those are like tokens, just, and it's on
Right,
random chains. It's
right.
like that's, so they still got some time. Like, so these things are not 100% accurate. It's not useful to look at them through that lens. However, when they forked Ethereum, right? And then there's like the Ethereum we know, and then there's Ethereum Classic, and
Yeah,
there's still a ton of like random shitty things like shit coins and like Litecoin, and there's all these random ones, and they're still got significant market caps, man. Like, I don't know what is like Ethereum Classic's market cap, and like there's
do you,
still
do you know
nodes.
what Ethereum Classic is?
It's the ones who decided not to, when they like, there was a story about Ethereum, they
Yeah, the hack,
like
the DAO.
yeah.
It's called the DAO. It's very interesting, right? So uh, Ethereum today is actually sort of like the sinful Ethereum, as in it's not the original one,
Yeah,
but it's still the one that people use anyways.
that's what, here's the thing that I've never found valid, which is so people make the argument that these like there's all these like, first it was Bitcoin maxis shitting on Ethereum maxis, now it's like Ethereum maxis shitting on altcoins or
Yep.
whatever, like, and Cardano and Solana maybe historically were in that group, but now they've gotten so big, they're only like whatever 18 months behind Ethereum in terms of market cap. Like I don't know, what did Cardano hit this last summer? It was like 70 billion in market cap, which is like what Ethereum was just like 2 years ago. So they're pretty big now. I don't know if they're called, they should still be called altcoins, but the thing that they talked about, they're like, oh, you guys are not decentralized, you guys are controlled, whatever. I'm like, dude, Ethereum is still it's basically a company. It's like, it's still a handful of guys, and like they probably have the largest, in my view, what I would call coalition of programmers and validators and stuff. But it's still, there's still a hierarchical like top that's running things and
Yeah.
issuing code and updates. So I'm like, when you're looking at, so when and I own in Ethereum, I have money in Ethereum, I have money in Cardano and in Solana, right? And certain ones I think have maybe earlier in their adoption S curve, and so like you were saying, the train hasn't left as much on Cardano, so like maybe there's more upside to being in that ecosystem. But when I was thinking about it, like I view these things as more right now, at least in today's phase, as more like investing in companies. Like I'm literally watching the top teams of these people, and like, do I trust that CEO and those people who are at the top to be good stewards of these chains? Because these chains are functionally like companies in my view. Like
Yeah.
like Steve Jobs had to attract developers to his iPhone ecosystem, right? And just because he's the CEO of Apple doesn't mean that he can just you can maybe exert in Web 2, they could exert more control over their system and like gatekeep their app stores and things, which was for the most part they were benevolent and didn't, they had high fees, but they wouldn't too much discriminate against people. Maybe they would compete directly, issue Apple Music to compete directly with like Spotify, but they were never like at the level of like Amazon. But yeah, so these like Hodgkinson and Vitalik and the Ethereum team and Anatoly and the Solana team, and then that guy from like NYU who's on the Avalanche team where he was shitting all over Solana. Like those guys are people that if I'm going to invest in their chains, I want to see those people because it's really, at least in the early phase, it's run by these guys. Like there's going to be tons of problems with these chains and you have to have smart teams to fix them. So for all intents and purposes, they're companies and you're basically like buying shares of a company.
Yeah, that's true. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see which one will end up being like Bitcoin, as in Bitcoin doesn't really have a founder. And right now, even though it people try to kill it several times, it's still pretty much, it's very robust. But again, in order for people to push code to Bitcoin, they need to vote. These miners have to vote. And I think like needs to reach 90% consensus, stuff like that. So I think some of these blockchains in the end will end up being like that, as in Charles Hoskinson's gonna be, he can't really push code anymore because right now IOHK is the one that's helping build Cardano, as in they're the ones with the brains to actually continue helping.
Isn't he leading IOHK?
Yeah, he's the CEO. So, but in the future, it's going to be based on voting as well. As in, if you want to lower the fees in Cardano, it's going to be voted by the community. And then only then can you push the code, something like that. So,
and if there's enough, if you tell me if I'm wrong about this, but like if there's enough of a schism, you can have the chain split like Ethereum Classic and the main one. And if there's enough use case for like, well, we want to take the chain in this direction and we want to take it in that direction, you can have two chains that are.
Binance Smart Chain is one of them.
It's a copy of Ethereum.
Yes, that is a blatant copy. The only difference is they just increase the block size and increase the block production rate. So the transaction speed is a lot faster. That's it. And the transaction fee is a lot lower too. But the thing with Cardano is because it's written Haskell and Plutus, not many people know how to read it. So if you do fork it, which is, the code is open source, it's like good luck trying to understand it. So, and then you need to get the validators, stuff like that.
That's a long-term problem. Like if you can't, if the whole point is like, if they don't, if the Cardano project will not have in my view, will not have long legs if over time it doesn't attract developers. The whole idea is you can't criticize it now for not having a lot of developers compared to Ethereum because it's still so early in the blockchain game. So like right now it looks like, okay, Ethereum's like, has all these apps on it and all this other stuff. But like, if blockchains are as legit as we think they are, this is like a new era of computing that, yes, will probably last as far as the eye can see. Like this is a new paradigm in computing. We don't even have the vision to see beyond it. It's like, no, this is a new thing and it's staying. And so I'm sure at some point there might be something different. Or maybe not, maybe if, what if they finally figure out like what is it, SHA-256? What if like someone like figures out like, is it like an unsolvable, it's an unsolvable math problem, right?
Yeah, at least probability wise. But well, the idea with SHA-256 is every time it generates a random set of strings or numbers, it's the first time the universe has ever witnessed those sequence of letters and numbers together. That's how low the probability is of like someone actually figuring it out.
Yeah.
But maybe quantum computers could catch up.
The quantum computer issue is the issue.
Yeah. Then you need to have quantum
blockchains,
proof, like hashing algorithms, which I think already exists. I think it already does.
Yeah. No, that's a super interesting thing. And I do think, yeah, anybody could right now, like I could today copy and paste Solana's code. I mean, that's the beauty of these blockchains. Everything's public. And so then I could be running Bolana or whatever.
Yeah, you could.
But it would be on a single validator. And then someone else is like, well, I don't value your stupid chain at all. Right. So
yeah. And then somebody else could do a 51% attack.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Last thing before I let you go, I want to ask you about, could you explain how do tokens themselves work? Are tokens, would you put them as a side chain, or would you put them as something different?
No, tokens are, you really have to see what it looks like. Let me try to, is it okay if I share screen?
Yeah, like USDC, yeah.
Let's see, ERC20 token. I just want to use the ERC20 as an example, because a token is actually a set of, it's just a bunch of code, and each code has the ability to do something like burn, or it can claim the owner, things like that. So it's very, very simple, and it's not a sidechain though. It's actually a set of code that a token in Ethereum is actually a contract.
It's a smart contract sitting on top of Ethereum. But
so,
you need to have you don't need to have validators, right? It's already sitting on.
How do I share screen on this? Oh, there's a green button. Host disable.
Do I press share? You can press it?
Or do I can't press it now. I think it's disabled.
Switch you to admin. Host more. How do I make you host? Make host? Okay. Now you can share your screen.
Okay. Oh no, I have to allow Zoom to change my system preferences, as in to quit and reopen. Oh, don't want to do that.
Let's skip that for now. Here, make me the host again.
Or if you want to, you can, let's see.
Should I
send you a link? And then, so essentially it's just a bunch of functions. It's like, wait, how do I switch to?
I took the host back.
Oh, you took the host back?
Yeah, do you want it?
No. But if you want to share a screen, I sent you the link on the chat.
Okay. Here,
it's just so a token needs to have a name, needs to have a symbol, needs to have a total supply. There's a transfer function, so you can send it from one address to another. And then there's an allowance, so you can check.
Okay. We'll have to, it's also asking me to do a ton of like system preference stuff.
Yeah, we can skip that for later then.
No, that's interesting. What I'll do is I'll look at it, but so I was wondering, do these tokens they don't require their own separate validators and nodes and networks, right? They just run on top of Solana.
Right, they
were Ethereum.
So these tokens they're just sitting in a wallet, or in the case of Solana and Ethereum, it's actually like a bank account. So if it sits in a wallet, then that wallet has a balance, and then each of these tokens, they have the owner of the address. So the token actually has the information of the address.
So
Sorry, of the owner's
I
address.
can make 1,000 Trevin tokens, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You
And
can, there's a template for it. So if you're gonna make one, it's very easy to make it.
then I can then they're sitting in my MetaMask, right? Then I can send them to I can send you 100, and
Yep.
it's just riding the Ethereum rails.
Yep.
It's like a thing, and you could just issue tokens as much as you want. So you don't have to do Circle, I'm assuming, doesn't have to do much, right?
Right.
Like
Right.
whereas Matic, because there's a side chain, they have to actually build and support their side chain, and the validators on there are, so that if your criticism is that like Solana is too concentrated and too controlled, then I mean you can't really use Matic then, because Matic is way more concentrated and controlled, right? So like those are sometimes I think about, I'm like, well, from a usability perspective, these L2s, you have to, if you're looking at like where's the point of vulnerability, if you're only using L2s or side chains, then that's even more concentrated than this other thing. So no, that's very interesting. I think there'll be I don't want to say infinite, but a much larger number of tokens, because you're able to create tokenomic behaviors around certain things, and then you can kind of fence off, little towns, or Disney bucks or whatever, your university money. Like I remember, I think at my college was called Goucher College, a small liberal arts school in Maryland, and they had like gopher bucks. The gopher was the mascot. And I think the trick of these like fake money things that these like theme parks and things do is they know that you're never going to get their margin is in, like, you're not going to end up a lot of it will go to waste, right? So when you buy Disney bucks, like you're not going to spend it all. It never converts back into dollars and all of that. So tokenization, I think, it's like, and from a user perspective, it's pretty user friendly, right? Like it's so easy to make them.
Yeah. As in, if you want to talk about making a random token, like Shiba Inu is actually one of those, as in you don't have to be a programmer to make one. And yeah, with tokenization as well, you're actually creating a walled garden, as in if you want to interact with my products, then you must use these tokens, for example. So people are incentivized to keep using it, and yeah, stuff like that.
I think when I was have you used Bonfida before? Have you interacted with the Solana stuff yet?
No, actually.
Yeah, it's they're the ones who issue the like .sol names, and they originally you were using USDC tokens to pay, and then they switched, and it was like priced at like $21. Then they like switched like a few months ago, and they were like, well, we want to develop the ecosystem for our token, and so they made you buy FIDA tokens. And I'm a long-term believer in, like, ENS dropped their ENS tokens, and you got money, right? You got like
I never checked my ETH account again. If I did, it's probably hacked again. I don't care.
Oh wait, all of your ETH is your name?
My NFT got hacked as well. Yes, my ENS token.
And you never got back into Ethereum after that?
No, I did move to Matic because obviously Ethereum, the gas fees are too high. But then when it comes to security, I am, as in from a programming standpoint, I think it's too risky. That's why I left.
Well, that guy got another $15,000 worth of tokens after the hack. So at some point we need to devise a plan to find this guy and do something to him.
I give this guy a salute for being able to do this, but honestly, it's just You know, you could have a token that has a security flaw in it that if you participate in an airdrop, your whole wallet could get drained.
Oh, really?
So just you won't see it coming. Stuff like that in Ethereum. That's what made me feel a bit unsafe.
Oh,
Not a
so you
bit,
have to
but
be
quite a
careful about these airdrops. I didn't know because on Twitter there's all these people that are I guess you have to still you have to connect your wallet to get
right.
hacked. Just because they
And
have your like so just because they have my name on Ethereum doesn't mean that they can hack me.
yeah, yeah. And one of the biggest things that I despise in Ethereum is I understand they did this for security. Is I don't know if you remember using Uniswap or 1inch stuff like that, but every time you want to interact with one of these ERC20 tokens,
Mhm.
you need to sign, or you need to sort of enable interacting with the smart contract. And
Okay.
when you do that, you need to pay gas. But the biggest problem with that isn't about gas. It's about when people create these fake sign
Yeah.
pop-ups. So you
Okay.
think you're setting up to allow this interaction with the smart contract, but you're actually sending money to them and you just signed that transaction.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that's why it just, to me, doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, this is one thing when I was buying a bunch of Solana NFT, like the names and domain names and stuff. Like you're double clicking because you had to bid on the money, to bid on the name. You had to click like three times, right, to authorize it. First to connect your wallet, and then like authorize it, and then sign it or whatever, and then the money is in. Then to get the refund if somebody outbid you, you had to like then click 2-3 times to get your money back into your wallet, right? Because they would
Mm,
system would refund your money. But what ended up happening from a user perspective is you're just like, yes, go. Like you're just clicking yes, 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 back and forth. And
right.
in that time, you're fine because they're not ripping you off. But it's super easy from a user perspective to just like, the European Union, they have that like cookies bullshit where they're like forcing you to click accept cookies 1,000 times a day
Mm,
because they have that rule. And it's like nobody's reading that. All you've done
yeah,
is
yeah,
like slow
exactly.
down the internet.
Yeah.
Um,
So
so
that's a huge problem, I think.
from a user behavior perspective, like there needs to be a better way, like at least with when you're downloading an app in the App Store on iOS, right? First of all, there's already the pre-filter of they're not letting anybody in, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, they still have code in there. Like Uber was really famous for like having code in like semi-malicious code where they would like track their users in ways like
Yeah. Yeah.
they would hide it from Apple and Apple would find it. And but like Apple didn't want, like any smaller company, they would kick them out and ban them. But because Uber was enormous, they were like, you need to stop doing this. But then it still like has like Face ID, or like you put in your passcode to accept it before you download it, right? And so
Mm,
that's like another layer of like, they're not trying to slow you down, but if it's like a new program that you haven't pre-downloaded before, then it's going to do that. Now with wallets, there you already have the biggest issue, which is nothing is ever reversible. There's nobody to call. You can't call the police. Once
yep.
it's out, it's never coming back. And then
Yeah.
you've got this, uh, easy ability to like hack and fake like a trusted site. So this is another thing that really has to be addressed at some point. And I'm sure someone's going to make a bundle of money once they figure out a way to like, you know, I don't know,
Yeah.
maybe connecting face IDs to wallets or something else.
Yeah. Like I know people from the DeFi world are against banks, but I gotta say though, these crypto wallets, they have to be as trustworthy as a banking app, because that's, I think that's the standard that they have to follow.
Well, I would put it this way. This is the analogy that I like, and I don't know if it fully is applicable, but I would say that like Bitcoin is like gold, right? You can put
Mm,
it in your you can hold it in your hands and walk around with it. Like in my view, the MetaMask is like the mailbox. You've been to the States, so like there's all these mailboxes everywhere on the front curb. which anybody, if they want to, can literally just like walk by and stick their hand in there and just steal your
Yeah.
mail. But because there's enough enforcement and stuff, nobody actually does that. But it's not super secure. Then there's like the middle ground where like packages on the front door, and then there's like lock in your house. So like you're not gonna leave gold in your mailbox. If it's anything worth value, they'll at least put it on your front door if it's a small value thing. And anything that's like if you order an iPhone from Amazon, they're not going to let the delivery person leave it on your doorstep. You have to sign and receive it in person, right? Yeah. So anything of high value has to be a high security thing. And you can have, if you had like a Ledger thumb drive, right? You're then taking responsibility, like your keys, your money, right? But it's just like taking responsibility of like having gold in your safe in your house. Then you are responsible for securing it, both technically, don't lose the drive. And then also, if someone down the street realizes on a single thumb drive, you have enough money that I could steal the value of like a house, like I could steal like 500 grand worth of like money off of a single thumb drive that I just break into your house and steal it. Whereas before, that's like having super low security. So then you end up going back to, okay, well then now I need to put this super high value thumb drive in a vault at a bank.
You know what I mean? Then it ends up being more centralized. But that's the thing. People in the DeFi world, they're like, oh, we're against these monopolies, these companies like Google, Apple. Yet they still use them. They still buy Apple products. They still use Gmail because they trust them. So yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I think longer term, the next time we chat, we should talk about the transition from, right now we're not fully transitioned from Web 2 to Web 3. Like everything in Web 3 has Web 2 choke points, right? Everything is running on Amazon what servers and XYZ. Like everything is still web. There's no like blockchain laptop or blockchain smartphones yet. So like, even just that's an even more abstract way, but like all the way down to like a lot of these chains don't run. If Amazon really wanted to shut something down, it would be like they would go get really slow, and maybe the tier 1 chains like Solana and Ethereum will run no problem. But like a lot of the services, like I think like OpenSea still uses a ton of like cloud service services, and so nobody is. And so I think like maybe Filecoin and Arweave and some of these other services will eventually like complete the circle, so you can just start and end in a Web3 environment. So we'll see. To be continued. Trevin, thank you so much for spending the time. The watchers and listeners, I get some comments. People really appreciate you explaining things from a technical level.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me here.